You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 76. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. As a mom and a stepmom, I do my very best to help my children on their life journey, because even as an adult, I know how tough it can be. I've made my mistakes along the way, but I've also learned a number of lessons. My stepchildren have experienced divorce at a young age. I experienced the loss of a parent to cancer at a young age. These are big moments in life, no matter what age you are. But learning how to cope with them at a young age is really freaking tough. My guest today is Sara Olsher, founder of Mighty and Bright and author of 6 children's books that focus on kids experiencing divorce, to having a parent or loved one with cancer, to having cancer themselves. She saw a need for such resources as her own child was going through the confusion of having parents get divorced and then later finding out her mom had breast cancer. You're going to hear how Sara took the challenges and obstacles presented in her life and turned them into positives to change the future of her daughter, herself, and now children all over the country. I loved learning about Sara's work and her journey, and I know you will too. Hi, Sara.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to getting to know you more and hearing all about you and your business, because it's unique and something we haven't talked about before. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
Can you take a moment and introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Sure. My name is Sara, and I'm the founder of Mighty and Bright, which is I basically write and illustrate children's books, and each one of them comes with a calendar that helps kids understand hard things. So whether it's divorce or major illness like cancer or a pandemic and all of the changes that happen with school, basically I'm all about explaining to kids what's going to happen next so then they're not anxious.
I love that, because predictability is key really in any human being's life, but in children especially.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I'm a stepmom of 2 and a mom of 2, so I get that.
Get that. Yeah, I think we kind of underestimate kids in that way. We just think like, oh, well, I know what's going on in my head, like, so they're going to be fine. But in reality, like, if I didn't have my phone, I would completely freak out. And kids are the same way, but they don't have any way to organize their thoughts. And that's kind of up to us. So, yeah.
So let's talk about your journey, because you mentioned at least 2 things in your intro of divorce and major illness. And I know those are 2 things that have happened to you. So can you take us on this journey of what your life has been like and how you got to where you are today in launching this company?
Sure. Yeah, it's funny when I look back on my life and I think about like all of the weird things that I did that didn't seem to be related, they all kind of like culminated in what I do now, because my degree is in psychology and I wanted to be a therapist, but I was having daily migraine headaches and had to leave my graduate school program. And oddly enough, turned into an illustrator. And I ran a small business for 6 years doing illustrations for weddings, and a business called Stinker Pants, of all things. And I would draw people like at their wedding venue and like just unique, fun illustrations for kind of like offbeat weddings. And then from there, when I got a divorce, I just like could not handle the stress of what was essentially like a very low income gig. It was just too stressful. So I went into marketing.
And you were probably like, weddings, I'm over it.
Totally. Yeah. I was like, oh my God, if I hear one more bride talk about the shade of her bridesmaids' dresses, I am going to freak out. Like it just felt at that time like so far from what I was able to cope with. So yeah, I just got a regular job doing marketing, and my divorce was really hard. My daughter was only a year and a half old, and she was having a lot of anxiety, and everything was changing because I went from working at home to then working outside the house. She had to go to daycare. It was a mess. And so I actually found a therapist for her when she was 2. And I think it must have been my background in psychology, even though I didn't study child development. I just knew somehow that it could help her. And it was amazing. The therapist, I learned so much about child development. I think I probably would have studied kids specifically had I known how smart they are and how cool their brains are. But from there, I was like, oh, well, kids learn visually, and my kid does not understand when she's going to see her dad next. So I used some of the illustrations from my business to make a visual co-parenting calendar where she would be able to see on the wall, when she'd be with me and when she would be with her dad. And I mean, she was 2. She was obviously couldn't read. She was verbal, but a 2-year-old isn't going to be able to explain their anxieties very well. They just kind of express fear. And I couldn't believe what a difference it made in her anxiety level just to understand when she was going to see her dad. And it helped us to kind of she doesn't understand the concept of time at that age. So even using that calendar to be okay, this is a sleep. So it's 2 sleeps until daddy, it just really made a huge difference. And I thought, I was commuting into San Francisco, it was an hour each way. And I used that time to really learn a lot about child development and child psychology. And I thought, you know what? I think that this could be something that could help a lot of families. So I basically just turned it into a website because I love doing creative stuff. And that's how it started. It was a side gig for 5 years before I really did anything with it.
That's a long side gig.
It's a long side gig. And I think I just knew on some level that it was really what I was meant to do. But I just I had so many fears about, going into it full time. And I had all of these beliefs that, I come from a family that very much follows, the traditional way of doing things. You go to school, you go to graduate school, you become a doctor, you become a lawyer. This is what you do. And if you kind of don't take that direction, it's terrifying and wrong, and you're going to be poor forever. So I think I just had some conditioning in my head that I had to take a traditional career path. And that was why I just left it on the side for so long. Then when my daughter was 7, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And at that point, literally everything changed overnight. And I just was I can't work because I'm going through major surgery and chemo. And so I essentially took a year off on disability. And during that time, just was trying to figure out how to explain this to my daughter and how to really make sense out of the chaos that came from literally everything changing overnight. And my mom essentially moved in with us, and my boyfriend did too. And different people were taking her to school and picking her up after school. And I was so tired, I couldn't think of ways to connect with her. And it just felt like a mess. And it was really the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with. But from there, just my creative mind, when I wasn't exhausted, was always churning and trying to find a way to make it better. And I ended up writing a children's book to explain what cancer is because I couldn't find anything when I was first diagnosed that actually explained the science of cancer, which was really important to me because after everything I had learned about the way that kids' brains work, I knew that they could handle that. They could handle the explanation in a simplified way and that it actually would relieve their stress versus this weird, a lot of the kids' books are like, mommy's got a boo-boo or mommy doesn't feel good and her hair is going to fall out. And it's like, well, why? So I ended up writing a children's book and it was like the minute I put it up on Amazon, it immediately became a bestseller. It was awesome. I was like, this is what people need.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I was like, this is what people needed. And they just want an easy way to explain to their kids what cancer is and like how it's going to affect the kid's life. And that was when I realized, life is a series of difficult things sometimes. And divorce, I thought was going to be the hardest thing that I ever had to go through. And then I realized through cancer that it was just one thing out of many things that people go through also while trying to parent. And parenting is hard enough on a good day, but then you throw some major stressor in and it's just it becomes impossible. And I really just wanted to make that easier for people. So that is how I turned this into a business. And now I have 6 children's books and they come with calendars for basically the book explains what the concept is. So what is a divorce? How is this going to affect your life? And answers the worries and the things that the kids might have. And then the calendar itself is a continuation of the book so that parents can continue a conversation about what's going on. They give their kids a sense of control over what's happening. And it really is just the simplest way to relieve their worries. And because it's answering questions that kids have, it isn't a hard thing to implement. It's you hang it on the wall and they want to participate in it. It's not like when you're setting a routine and the kids are like, I don't want to put my shoes on. I don't want to go to school. It's not like that. It's they love it. It's awesome. So that's that.
That's incredible. My father passed away when I was 7 of cancer, and there was absolutely nothing in the 80s like this. Yeah. Nor did I don't think my mom even looked for something, to help us understand, but it happened very quickly as well. Mm-hmm. And then being a stepmom, I met my stepkids when I was in my mid-20s and I was completely clueless. I'd never done this before, but I did recognize that we needed order and, predictability. And the only way that I could do that and be a participant was to prepare our meal plan in advance. Mm-hmm. So the kids knew this is what we're going to have for dinner. So at least we know that's what's coming.
Yeah.
If it's plans, if it's meals. And then I do the same thing for my kids. They know either what's for dinner, they know what's expected of them in the morning because we have a chart with icons and stuff and they've helped make it, because when we made it, they didn't know how to read either.
Yeah.
But it's so important. As adults, we need this.
We do. Kids need it in a specific way because they learn visually and they learn with repetition. And it's fascinating, you're saying your kids couldn't read yet. And it's all they need is an icon. It doesn't even need to necessarily relate to what it is. It's you could use a heart for, I don't know, martial arts class. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that makes a whole lot of sense, but they understand what it means. And then they go back to it over and over. That's why they read books over and over again, is because they're learning by repetition. They're learning by seeing the same thing over and over. They're learning by, just having that information repeated in the same way visually.
That's funny that you mentioned the reading and the repetition because my daughter, she's almost going to turn 5 and she's picking up what her brother is doing because he just turned 6 and is reading in kindergarten. And she goes, Mommy, I cheated on that book. And I go, what do you mean you cheated? She said, well, I knew what that word said. I memorized it. I go, yeah, that's called reading. But that's exactly what they do. And she thought she was cheating because she knew the word.
That is so cute. God, I love kids. I love them.
I do. I love mine. I could give them away sometimes, but I love them overall.
Isn't that crazy about parenting? It's just like it is the hardest and the best thing. And it's just like it is the most like complicated feeling. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think yesterday I could have cried. My heart melted in a good way. It's like all of the emotions you can feel just in a matter of an hour with your child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you mentioned being a step parent. I am one also. And that is like such a hard job. And I
That's
think
harder than being a parent, in my
it is.
opinion.
It is. I agree. There's so many moving parts to that relationship. And, when we were blending our family, my partner was just like, we have so many relationships to think about. It's like the relationship between you and I, the relationship between me and your daughter, the relationship between you and my daughter, the relationship between my daughter and your daughter. And I was like, oh my God, I think my brain is going to explode. But it's so true.
Yeah. With your daughter, as you implemented, this calendar, did your ex-husband do the same as well on his side so that she could have that consistency?
He didn't. And part of what we were dealing with, part of our problem was that we had a really bad divorce. And so we were doing a lot of like parallel parenting where basically like we were both just doing our own thing because we couldn't communicate. And so a lot of parents that are in a like position where they do get along, the ideal world is that both parents do it because the consistency between the houses is so important. But I think what we learned and what I learned from developing this with a therapist is that if they're not going to use it, you don't want it at the other house because it sort of like takes away the value of it for the kids. So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't ideal that he didn't use it, but she was also with me most of the time. So it didn't really matter anyway, I don't think. Like most of his visits were not overnights at first.
We had a lot of the same inconsistency, and I think that's one of the reasons for why people get divorced is because you're not the same people, and that's why in the end it simply doesn't work out. This seems to me like it would be such a great product for a mediator to bring into divorce proceedings.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny you should mention that. I actually was just speaking with a mediator last week about this, and she's like, God, this is fantastic. I would love to give this as like a closing gift to all of my clients. And I'm like, yeah, I think people, especially in the middle of a divorce, people always talk about putting the kids first, but they don't necessarily.
And they forget to.
Yeah, they forget to. And they also just don't necessarily know what that looks like. They're like, stop fighting over the kids. Like, don't say mean things about each other. And like, that's incredibly important. But also it's like, how do you actually help the kid? Like, what do you do to help the kid cope? And I think a lot of parents will reach for books, and it's a great starting place to explain what divorce is. But on a day-to-day basis, it's like you're not going to wake up every morning and like read a book about divorce, in the mornings versus like having this calendar. It becomes more than just a calendar. It becomes a reminder of what their life looks like, and that no matter who they're with, they're safe. They know what to expect. Kids attach to things, most kids have like a lovey or, some stuffed animal that's close to them. They attach meaning to them, and the calendar becomes the same sort of thing. It really helps the kids. So yeah, I think it would be a wonderful thing for people to have really early on in mediation. It would be great.
Well, I'm also thinking about how kids will have, now you've got two different bedrooms because you've got one at each house. So how great would it be to wake up and see something that's the same as at your other house?
Mhm.
I remember when my stepkids were younger reading something that said it takes a child 24 hours to kind of get comfortable and change their actions depending on the situation. And to me, that meant that when we picked them up on Wednesdays at 5 and dropped them off to school on Thursday at 8 a.m., they had no time to adjust.
Mhm.
And so that was chaotic. And so to remember that, Friday night when we pick them up, then they're not really going to be adjusted until Saturday night.
Yeah.
And so it's a constant, we're different households. There's different people. There's different roles. There's different everything that it takes that long for them to go, oh, okay, now I'm over here and I have to act this way, or this is how the people around me are going to act. So to have at least one small thing that they can recognize as a constant, it's a big deal in a little person's life.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I completely agree. And I think, there's so many difficult things about divorce. And I always am, when I'm talking to people who are divorcing, so many of them feel so incredibly guilty about putting their kids through this. And I'm not gonna lie, like
Yes.
it is really hard on the kids. And I think the thing that I always want to encourage parents to remember is that you're raising resilient children, and that no matter what happens in their lives are not going to be easy as much as we wish that they were, because that's just not what life is like. And they're going to face things that are difficult. And yes, it sucks that their childhood is this way, but you also can think about it in terms of like they're going through something difficult while you're there to hold their hand, while you're there to show them how to cope with things that are difficult, So they're not going through it alone. You're there for them. And all kids need is one loving and available parent to end up okay. So no matter what you're going through, whether it's divorce that you chose, or whether it's cancer that you didn't choose or divorce that you didn't choose, these are things that you can turn into life lessons that they will take with them forever. So it's not all negative.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that because you're absolutely right. And it's whatever you put into it and make it. And you can show that divorce is nasty and ugly, and you can hate someone that you once loved, or you can say, we were on this journey and it didn't work out the way that we thought, but you're our priority. And we're going to make sure that you see that and feel that in our actions.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to make sure to put into my children's book about divorce that I really didn't see anywhere else was that sometimes parents don't get along. And, that doesn't, it's not about the kids. It's always about parents' issues with each other. And that even if they don't get along, like that the hope is that as time goes on, they'll get along better. And that, there's hope for these things, because I think a lot of books ignore the fact that parents like might still fight, and that can be scary for kids, or that, for kids, 5 minutes is a lifetime. Like when's dinner? It's in 5 minutes. Oh, I'm going to die of starvation before that happens, and then you have this like long period of time where your parents are not getting along, or where things are difficult, or, like if you just look at the last school year where kids were having major changes to their school schedules, it just feels like it goes on forever. But to put the hope in that it will not always be this way, I think is really important for kids to keep in mind.
Yeah. And parents too.
Yeah. Yeah. I never would have thought that things could get better because my ex-husband and I got along so poorly, but now we share meals together. I love his wife. My daughter has a little half brother who's like the cutest thing ever. And we get along well. I think so there's definitely hope for people who are going through even the worst of divorces, that things can get better.
That's wonderful that you can give people hope like that because it's needed. And I think oftentimes we see divorced couples who, all share meals and the ex-wife and the new wife are all best friends. And you're like, that's funny.
I know.
That's cute.
I know. And I would have been like, that is not going to be my life. There's no way. But I also think part of it was like, for me going through cancer, like I just stopped participating in like the energy that was going back and forth between my ex and I was too tired to deal with it. And so I wouldn't get worked up when he would do things that normally would upset me. Even if I never reacted to him initially and I would just cut off the communication, I just like, there was something, I don't want to sound too woo-woo, but like there's something in my energy where I just like cut it off. And that was a real turning point for us when I just was not participating in that pattern anymore. And then he stopped, and that really helped.
Yeah, I can see how you feed off of each other, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm in here in the trenches for 14 years, so I get it.
Yeah. Yep.
You're like, why does this keep happening?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you're just like, you know what? I can only control my behavior. And this is something that my husband has said since we met is, I look at myself in the mirror at night and I know what I've done. I know the effort I've put in, and that's all I can control. I can't control what somebody else does. And if that's how they want to live their life, that's on them. They can look at themselves in the mirror at night. But as long as you recognize that you're doing all you can and you're being as good of a person as possible, then it's really enlightening.
Well said. It's such a lesson in learning about yourself. Well said.
Yeah. I think I've learned more than I want to know about myself over the
years. Yeah. Yep. I can see that.
What are your other books about?
So my first book was about cancer, like when someone you love has cancer. And then actually from there, I did divorce, and I did 3 versions of my divorce book because I'm all about having people be able to see themselves in books. So I have what happens when parents get divorced, but then I also have what happens when moms get divorced and what happens when dads get divorced. So there's options for gay couples also. And then from there, I did what happens when a kid gets cancer, because I was, I had like 3 parents reach out to me and say, this calendar you've created is amazing, but I really wish that I had it for my child who's dealing with like a brain tumor or leukemia. And so last summer of 2020, I ran a Kickstarter to have that book printed, and it's being distributed to hospitals. I have a big goal this year of finding a donor for $1 million to help me provide these books and calendar sets to kids all across the United States for 4 years. I want to donate them to every children's hospital in the United States. So that is
That's amazing.
It's so, and the thing that is really wonderful is like how one thing has led to another, and the number of people who have reached out to me to like really make this the best thing it possibly could be. Like the professionals that work with the kids, like, can I help you with this? Can I read it and give you my feedback? Like parents who have kids that are dealing with pediatric cancer. And so I feel really good about what we've created. And, I don't even have to sell it to people. Like they're like reaching out to me and saying like, this is amazing. How do I get it? And I'm like, well, I want to be able to donate it to you, but to not have to convince them of its value is so cool. So that's my more recent one. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, I wrote 2 about the coronavirus and like basically how it affects a kid's day-to-day life. And one of those I just distributed for free at the beginning of the pandemic. And the other was a more complicated one for when kids are dealing with changing school schedules. So That one was what happens when school starts again. And what's kind of crazy is I wrote that at the beginning of the school year, and my daughter is going to go back to a hybrid school model in a month from now. So it's like this book that I wrote because I was like,
yes.
I think kids could benefit from this right now. It's like, 8 months later, and now it's still useful. And I was just thinking it was going to be
You're like, here, honey, read this again.
Yes, over and over, because I think everything keeps changing for kids right now. And in reality, for kids, like, they don't have the context that we have. So for most of them, like, day-to-day life is hard. And the changes that come from just like regular life that's not in the middle of a pandemic or divorce or cancer, it can be difficult. So it's about making sense of that stuff.
It does. Yeah. I love that you've taken these, negative times that you've had in your life. And because the whole premise of my podcast is that you are in control of your future and you get to make these decisions. And you've taken the negative things of divorce and cancer, and you've not only turned them into positives for yourself and your child and your family, but you're making all these positive changes for everyone else in the world. And I just think that's so incredible. And I thank you for doing that and for putting yourself out there and starting this business.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of like personal work that goes into running your own businesses. I'm sure you know, like, you just have to move through your own insecurities. And for me, so much of it was like, I am like, as much as I love interacting with people and talking with them one-on-one, I'm very shy. And I don't like putting myself out there. And so for me, having to realize that this was bigger than me and it wasn't about me, and that like what I've created is something that I've created, yes, but it's been with the help of so many other people, some of whom passed away before, they could share their learnings with other people. And I'm just in a position where I can share this with people, and it's not about me, it's about other people. And so I needed to get out of my own way and just do it.
Can you share where everybody can find you so they can make you a part of them?
I would love that. I'm on Instagram at Mighty and Bright Co. or my website is mightyandbright.com.
And then are your books just on your website, or can they find them on Amazon and other books?
They're on Amazon. Yeah, you can search for my name, which is Sara Olsher. It's SaraOlsher. And all of my books are available there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sara. I loved hearing about your journey and everything that you're doing. It's just so full of positivity. And when everybody goes and sees your Instagram and everything, they're going to see all of the bright colors and how you are truly just a shining light. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. Back at you. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you guys, I loved how we got to hear from yet another woman who has turned the negative into such positive and is literally changing the world, this time for children. I've seen firsthand how difficult these big life events can be for children, and yet how few resources there are out there. So I wholeheartedly applaud Sara and support her for the work she's doing, and I hope and pray she reaches her $1 million goal to ensure every child who needs her books receives them. Thank you once again for joining me, and from the bottom of my heart, I hope you are truly hearing how much positive can come from negatives. No matter what you're going through or have been through, you've got this. You can create the future you want to have. Until next week, my friends, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy.